Morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm just waiting to see those that have joined, make sure people are in the virtual room, which it looks like they are. We've got 32 joined, so we may as well make a start then, mightn't we, Sue?
Yep.
Great. So thanks everyone for joining us, and welcome to the introduction session for citizen feedback adjustments to the home support quality scores, and we're going to talk through the methodology. And thanks for signing up, and thanks for your interest, and hopefully you're in the right meeting and it's relevant. Is there any admin, Sue, that we need to be aware of in terms of how we're going to operate the session?
Yeah, just this is working as a webinar, so microphones and cameras are being switched off automatically. We haven't got the regular chat function, but we have got the Q&A function. So if you've got questions, it may be they're answered later on in the presentation, but if you do want to type them so you don't forget them, you can. And then we'll have a session at the end, sometime at the end, to go through those Q&As.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sue. And we don't usually allow sort of any AI or bot tools in terms of note taking. We are, I believe, recording and transcribing. So we will have some notes and obviously we'll share appropriately if needed after the session. So let's move on, if that's okay to move on to the next slide, please. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Alison Malik. I'm Head of Commissioning for the City Council. And I'm just going to do a bit of a brief introduction, and then I'll hand over to Sue and colleagues to present the rest of the information. So the purpose of today's session is really to inform you as home support providers, and hopefully all of you that have joined the call are either BCC colleagues or home support providers that hold a current home support contract with the council. And really, we want to talk to you about introducing citizen feedback adjustments to our home support quality score. For those of you that are new to our contracts in 2024, this was something that we had under our previous contracts. And for those of you, obviously, that are familiar with that, this is about reintroducing that arrangement under these new contracts. And what we want to do is share with you the methodology for calculating the quality score. Now, of course, we'll put the information on our website as we would always do once it goes live. But we wanted to share it with you so that you've got that the opportunity to do the questions and answers, as Sue's alluded to. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of background, hopefully you're familiar with these arrangements, but for those of you that might not be, it was a key part of our commissioning strategy to incorporate citizen feedback into our home support services and our commissioning processes. So you can see there two quotes that are directly taken from one from our commissioning strategy and one from our quality assurance framework guidance, which make clear that that's exactly what we will do. So really, this is just about us doing what we said we were going to do and what we set out to do. And it's really important for us that we have that citizen view of the services that we're commissioning, particularly for home support services, and that citizens get the chance effectively to influence how work is allocated to providers. Obviously, it's done indirectly through their feedback, but it's a really positive way of us incorporating their feedback into what we do. Next slide, please. So a little bit more background. So the citizen feedback adjustment wasn't initially applied, and this was a conscious decision that we made, and that was because we recognised we were going to have a number of new providers, and we wanted to give them the opportunity to have established a citizen feedback record. So if we'd have gone live with it on day one, effectively new providers that hadn't commissioned and contracted with the council before wouldn't have been in the same position as providers that had previously worked with us, who would have a number of reviews and a number of opportunities for citizen feedback to be collected. So we felt that that was a fairer way of doing things, to allow some time for feedback to be gathered across the market, and then we would implement it. So we had a look at the data at the 5-month point in preparation for implementing it within 6 months of the start of the contract, which is what we said we would do. But unfortunately, at that time, we didn't think that there was enough data across all providers that was equitable and that would allow us to fairly apply any adjustments. So we communicated with yourselves through the bulletins that that would be delayed, and we've then reviewed it again at the 11-month point, which is where we're at now. And we've had a look, and the position has significantly improved. So we've got a much greater volume of review data and therefore volume of citizen feedback across the market. And so decisions now been made that we will introduce the adjustment at the 12-month point, which is essentially this week. So hence why we wanted to give you the opportunity to share with you the methodology and the approach, and obviously give you the chance to ask and have your questions answered through the Q&A. Thank you very much. Next slide. So probably covered some of these elements, but just to reiterate why we're doing it. Our intention and our approach was set out in our commissioning strategies, as I've mentioned, which was approved by the council's cabinet. So, you know, there are things contained in the commissioning strategy that we said we would do, and we want to continue and go ahead with implementing those things. We also, as I've said, believe it's really important for citizens' experience to influence our decision making, and this is a good way of us being able to demonstrate that and achieve that. We also did some market engagement events prior to the tender, which were conducted in September, October 2023, all that time ago. We shared the approach there, and again, we had a lot of in-principle support from providers, but we also had some feedback that we needed to clearly explain the methodology, which is really what today is all about. And the citizen feedback element of the home support quality score will differentiate providers, meaning that we're less reliant on who makes the fastest offer. So the current arrangement, because we haven't implemented the citizen feedback, relies on an overall score that doesn't take into account the citizen feedback, but then to differentiate between offers. So if we had 2 offers from 2 silver rated providers with the same quality score, it would be the provider that made the quickest offer. We want to try and move away from that and re-implement the customer feedback score to allow us to do that. Thank you very much. And I think at that point, I'm going to hand over to Sue, who will be far more eloquent at being able to take you through the detail and the methodology. So over to you, Sue. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope I can live up to that. But yeah, so I'm the commissioning manager within the market intelligence team, and we look after the Care Match portal, and hence we're also looking after the methodology for the home support quality scores. As mentioned, there is a question and answer function in the right hand side of your screens where you normally find your chat function, and we'll review that at the end. Also, as we go through, I'll be using 2 examples to try and help demonstrate the methodology and hopefully make it as clear as possible. Thanks. Just checking what slide you're on. So at the moment, we are just working with the base quality score, which is the latest of the quality assessment that the provider has, either by BCC or the CQC. So what we're looking at is the overall rating, and the tables below show how the rating outcomes, and then the domains match across the BCC and the CQC ones. So for the BCC, a gold is equivalent to the outstanding. For CQC, we'll give a base score of 75. Silver is equivalent to good with a base score of 50. Bronze equates to requires improvement, which obviously we didn't initially have, but at any point during the contract we may have, which would equate to a base score of 25, and inadequate is the same across both types of assessment. It would have a 0 score. The language that we use when we publish the results is the one that matches to our rating, which is the gold, silver, bronze, and inadequate. And next slide, please. And then, as well as having the overall score, depends on the outcome of your latest assessment, we also look at the scoring for each of the domains. So the base quality score is made up of your overall rating and then a score attributed to each of the domain outcomes. So if we work through that as an example, we can look at provider A, for example, who's rated silver overall, silver in caring, effective, safe and well led, and a bronze in responsive. So their base quality score would be the 50 for the overall silver, and then 4 domains rated at 10 points each, and then the final responsive one being rated as bronze would get a score of 5. So that would give you the provider an overall base score of 95. In another example, provider B, they'd be rated silver overall, but they might have a gold in caring, an effective, silver in effective, responsive, and safe, and 1 bronze domain, which in this example would be well led. So their base score would be 50 for the overall quality rating of silver, 115 for a gold or an outstanding domain, 3 10s, and a 5 for their bronze domain. So they would get an overall score out of 100. Just one thing to point out at this point is the maximum score available is 150. So if a provider was rated outstanding overall and outstanding in all of their domains, they could potentially have a score of 150. Previously, we would convert those scores out of 100 to turn it into a percentage. We haven't done that this time because it's just an additional step. It wasn't really adding any value other than to give us a nice score out of 100. So what that means in practice is that all scores will look differently going forward, and you may find that you have or you see a provider with a score of more than 100. And then next slide, please. And then the second stage now, which is new and which we're introducing at this stage, is the citizen feedback adjustment. So we've got the base quality score, which is exactly the methodology we've got now, apart from the score might look different for that reason explained. And then we adjust that score based on the feedback we've received during the review process. So what we use is 12 months of citizen review data, and it just so happens we're reintroducing it as we now have 12 months worth of data, and it'll be a rolling 12 months going forward. And then as part of the review process, 2 questions are asked. One to be considered as part of the review discussion, and that's whether the person's outcomes are being fully met. Now that's a 2-part question. The first is, are the outcomes being fully met? And the second part is, if they're not being fully met, is that due to a provider quality issue? So if we look at the table, which kind of maps out the possible scoring available, the first question's along the top, which is the possible outcomes of fully met, partially met, or not met. If the citizens' outcomes are being fully met, the second part of the question doesn't get asked, and the provider's given a maximum score of 1 for that review. If they're only partially being met, then we need to understand whether it's a provider quality issue or down to any other things like the changing needs of the citizen. If the second part is answered yes, it's believed it's a provider quality issue. The score for that review, if the needs are only partially being met, would be 0.25. And if they're not being met at all, there'll be a score of 0 attributed for that review. If the needs aren't being fully met, but it's not been identified as being due to a provider quality issue, again, the example being that the reviews resolve a change in the needs of the citizen, then the provider won't be penalised and they'll still be given the full mark of 1. So if we go back to provider A and we consider that they've got 10 reviews within the 12-month period, 8 of those reviews are fully met and 2 are partially being met, and those have been identified as being due to provider quality issues. The provider will get a score of 8 times 1 for the fully met reviews and 0.25 times 2 for those being partially met, and that will equate to a score of 8.5. So for this part of the process, we do need to change the score to be out of 1, and this is so that the score that we get is the review of the proportion of the reviews rather than the total number of reviews that the provider citizens have had during the 12-month period, because that will vary across providers depending on the size of the provider, for example. So we'll divide the score of 8.5 by the maximum score available. So for 10 reviews, the most that could be scored is all of those being fully met, which would be a maximum of 10. And that provider for that review would be given a score of 0.85. Sorry, for those reviews in that period. Provider B, consider they have 6 reviews, 4 are fully met, 1's partially met, and that has been identified as being due to provider quality issue, and 1 citizen has not had their needs met, but that isn't identified as being due to the provider's quality. So for that provider, they'll have a score of 4 times 1 for the 4 citizens fully met, add the 0.25 for that partially being met due to provider quality issue, and then +1 for the ones that aren't being met, but not because any issues have been identified with the provider. And that will give a score of 5.25 out of a possible 6 fully met. So that provider's score for the first part of the citizen feedback adjustment will be 0.875. So sorry, that's a lot of information in detail, but because you'll have the slides afterwards, you can go away and kind of consider it in a little bit more time if you want to reflect on those examples. Can we have the next slide, please? And then the second question that's asked as part of the review process is known as the friends and family test. So we ask the citizen, would you recommend this service to a family member or friend? If the provider, if the citizen would recommend it, they'd be given a score of 1. If they wouldn't, a score of 0. And if the question's not answered for whatever reason, we wouldn't include that in the calculations, as again, we wouldn't want to detriment the provider not knowing the reason for that question not being answered. So for provider A, who has the 10 reviews, in this example, they've had 6 citizens that would recommend the service and 4 where the question's not been answered. So the maximum score they could receive is 6. And then again, we divide it by the number of reviews that were taken into consideration, which is 6. So they would be given the full mark of 1. So in that example, we would consider that the providers had 100% positive feedback from the citizen. And then in the second example, for provider B, that's had 6 reviews, suppose they've had 6 yeses, 1 no, and 1 not known. So that's 4 times 1 for the yeses, plus a 0 for the no. We don't take into account not known, so they have a possible maximum score of 5, and 4 out of 5 will give them a score of 0.8. And again, we have to change that into a proportion of 1 to reflect the proportion of reviews that would be recommended rather than the number of total reviews that provider has had for their citizens. And could we have the next slide, please? So because we just make one adjustment for the citizen feedback score, we take both the scores for question 1 and question 2, and we average those scores. So we only make one adjustment based on the average of the questions answered for each provider. So again, in example 1, they had 0.85 for the first question about the outcomes being met, and they had a full score of 1 for the friends and family test. Divided by 2, they would have a citizen feedback adjustment of 0.93. For provider B, they scored 0.875 in terms of outcomes being met and 0.8 for the friends and family test or question. So they would be given a score of 0.84. Just to say at this point, there are a few providers that still haven't had reviews at 12 months. A number of those haven't had citizens to be reviewed. So what we would do in those instances, we would give the provider the market average of the customer feedback adjustment for the rolling 12 months. And that is the same as what we used to do under the old methodology for the previous home support contract. And then next slide, please. And so now we just look at how that customer feedback adjustment affects the overall quality rating for the providers A and B. So we would add that customer feedback score to the base quality score we looked at earlier in the slides. So provider A, if you remember, had a quality score of 95, and they have now had a citizen feedback adjustment of 0.93. So their quality score would be 95.93. In example 2, provider B had a base quality score of 100 and a citizen feedback adjustment of 0.84. So their quality score would be 100.84. And then if we have a look at the next slide, and we are coming towards the end for questions, what we'll do is we'll look at how that change in methodology has impacted the distribution of the scores. So currently, because we were just looking at the latest quality inspection, and we had 64 providers and a joint score of 67, those are the providers that are rated silver overall and silver in each domain. So we couldn't distinguish between those providers and their quality. We've now got a much greater spread, as you can see. I don't expect you to be able to read the actual scores, but you can see the spread demonstrated on that chart is much greater. We still have a number of providers, so 39, that are those silver providers and silver in all domains that have had 100% positive feedback from citizens. So there is a group of providers we're still not able to distinguish between in terms of quality, but overall the spread is greater. And as Alison said, we're achieving what we set out to do, which was take into account the citizen voice in terms of attributing the quality score to providers. And if we look at the last slide before the Q&A, what that shows is how the spread has changed across the areas. So within the areas that you're receiving referrals to, the top row is how scores were currently grouped. So again, you've got that grouping around the 67. Areas 4 and 5 had some outstanding providers or silver providers with one outstanding domain. So their spreads was always a little greater. And then the bottom line shows what it is going forward. So again, still a grouping around the providers with the 100% feedback and the silver in all the domains and overall, but a much greater variation overall and the reduction in the number of providers that have got that that tightest grouping. That's all I've got in terms of the slides. And like I said, I'm sorry, that's an awful lot of talking and figures and examples, but hopefully with the time to reflect on the slides afterwards when we publish them, you'll be able to work through those examples and understand them in a bit more detail if it wasn't clear as I was going through, which is absolutely fine if it wasn't. So if we go over to the Q&As, I was just having a little look. I can't see anything in there at the moment. So if people did want to start typing in there, unless anybody else can see any Q&As, I certainly can't. Oh, Alison, thank you. Sorry, I needed to refresh it, I think.
No, I can't see any either, Sarah. I was just going to say, would it be helpful to for providers to understand where we've still got a block of providers? So on the slide that's on the screen, for example, we've still got 17 in area 1 that will have the same score. Is it worth just confirming that, because we can't distinguish any further due to quality, how that will work?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, as was in the earlier slides, one of Alison's earlier slides, which is currently what we were doing is providers that have got the joint highest quality offer made, and the referral gets assigned to the provider that made the fastest offer, as set out in our strategy, which is what Alison quoted from. And that will still be the case going forward if we get more than one offer. So, for example, in area 1 from a provider rated 101. So in that grouping of 17, it will still be the provider that made the offer first in those instances.
Thanks, Sue. We've got a number of questions from Anil posted now in the chat.
I can't see. I'm just going to refresh.
No worries. The first one is shall I read them out for you? And you can maybe field how we answer them. How do you check whether a person's outcomes are being met or not?
Yep. Oh, thank you. I can see them now. Yep. So that's part of the review question. So it would be consideration between the social worker and the citizen as part of their discussion as the review process.
And that then links on to which documents or evidence do you rely on for this assessment?
And that is the review form. So the questions embedded within the review form.
Yeah, which are asked by the social worker to the citizen or their representative, aren't they? And they're just capturing their feedback. Do you provide the provider with an opportunity to explain or submit additional evidence?
No, we don't currently, no.
Right.
And just on that point, I think it's just about also managing how do we actually manage a process such as that. So we don't, because obviously the conversation that's been had with the citizen and the social worker is reflective of their view of the delivery of the service in terms of the outcomes being met, and obviously the citizen's personal opinion on whether they would recommend it, but also from a process point of view, if you consider the number of citizens and reviews we would have in 12 months, it would be very hard to build a process like that in.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, it is opinion, and we understand that there's there are pros and cons to that approach, but that is the approach that we've set out in our strategy and that we want to take forward and will be taking forward. I'm just checking. I can't see any other questions from anyone else, so I'll just work through a couple of others from Anil. How can citizens provide their feedback?
So currently, it is via the review process, a number of which are done in person. I think there's a very few telephone reviews, or there have been in the past. I don't think that number's quite as high now, but it is only via the review process, whether in person or over the phone.
Brilliant. And is there a minimum percentage of citizen feedback required, considering that each company may have a different number of citizens?
No, there isn't. There isn't, because we could have very small providers with a small number of citizens, and we wouldn't want to penalise them from using the feedback that's been collected. Also, as the scores change and some providers start winning packages and they're building up their portfolio of citizens, we wouldn't want to exclude the feedback up into a certain threshold. But what we do, as mentioned, but I appreciate it was a lot of information to try and communicate in one go, especially in a monotonous way. So I apologise for that. But the score is changed into like a percentage of the number of the reviews. So if somebody had 5 good reviews out of 5, and somebody had, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but 4 good reviews out of 5, it's 100%. The one's got 100% good feedback. The other's got shouldn't have done it, should I? 75% good feedback. So it's done proportionately. I should have done that with a higher number of reviews for the second example, but yeah, it's done proportionally. So the number of reviews in a way isn't as relevant, because we're looking at it as in, well, what proportion of your reviews have got positive feedback rather than just the number.
Okay. And then how often do you update or change the scores?
So monthly, we'll be looking at a rolling 12 months of review data.
Right, thank you. And if negative feedback is received, do you share this with the provider to support improvement?
But part of the issue is as you've seen from the questions, it's a very high level question in terms of, would you recommend it, yes or no? Because of the low number of reviews some providers might have, and the fact that we want citizens to feel comfortable to answer those questions honestly, we don't immediately give the feedback. We don't share that feedback, because it may be possible to work out which citizens given which feedback. And I think at the moment what we're wanting to do is encourage those citizens to answer, and feel free to answer those questions honestly.
What I would perhaps add to that, I don't know if anyone else wanted to add, but what I would also say is that if during the review the social worker and the citizen identify that there are some issues, social workers should usually complete another process. So if there are quality concerns, that should go into a SQUID form, which is one of our quality concern forms, which would then come across to the commissioning team to have a look at, and contact may be made as a result of that with providers, or a number of things might happen as a result of that. So if outcomes aren't being met, or there's a really serious problem, social worker will absolutely pick up on that. But doesn't necessarily mean that the negative feedback will still be there. But yes, there will be chances for things to be resolved. They won't just ignore problems with regards to citizens not getting what they need.
Yeah, thanks, Alison.
Don't know, can you see? I think there's a couple of other posts now, so I don't know if you want to.
So how is feedback collected, and hopefully going through Anil's questions have clarified that, but it's as part of the review process, and it's the 2 questions that we've gone through on the presentation. Let me try and refresh again. That's the only other one I can see.
Okay, I've got a couple more. Would all providers receive the same number of reviews per month? If not, how will the scores be affected? Which I think you've covered in Anil's response already.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So how would providers know about their new quality score?
So it's displayed in the Care Match portal, and it's also published on our provider directory on the Shaping the Market pages as well.
Yeah, brilliant. So it's updated in the Care Services directory, and you can look it up there. How often will the reviews take place, and where can providers see their scores? So we've touched on the scores. In terms of the reviews, I mean, I can answer that one if you like. So the reviews are the social work reviews. So they happen if there's been a change in need, for example, if somebody contacts us and requests a review and there's a reason to do that, there might be a safeguarding concern, they might have other concerns. And also we do endeavour to do regular reviews, probably not 12 monthly, but we do conduct regular reviews as a matter of course as well. So there are a good number of reviews completed every year by our social work colleagues, and as part of our improvement journey, we're also looking to increase that number of reviews that happen and the regularity of those reviews. Another question about how we'll be able to get our score. So hopefully that's been answered. So it's published on the Care Services Directory. What else have we got? Would you be able to share the questions with the providers commonly asked during the reviews? I think we've done that through here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the 2 questions we've gone through, and we'll be sharing these slides afterwards so they can be referred to within the slides.
So yeah, the 2 questions that we've talked about, Hardik. And when does a provider receive their first score?
So this new methodology has been calculated. Now we reviewed it 11 months, but we're now at the 12-month point. So we've produced those scores, and they'll be in the Care Match portal from this Wednesday. And that's the 24th of September.
Yeah, I can't see anything else at the minute in terms of questions, but I don't know if anyone else can. Sometimes the systems take a little while to update. Don't know if you just wanted to go on to the last. Yeah. There was one more slide, wasn't there?
Yes, there is, yeah.
Next one after that, yeah.
You've got a hand up, I think. Hands up.
I think we're only taking questions and answers through the Q&A, aren't
we? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I wasn't aware that function was still available.
I think it just said it came up with Dave, didn't it?
Yeah, the microphones aren't enabled, so I don't know why it's allowing you to put your hand up. Sorry, because I don't think we can be able to hear you. So if you are able to put that in the chat, and we'll refer to it after we've gone through the details on this slide. So thank you for attending the event, and thanks for your support recently with all of our other provider events as well. Further information on the quality scores will be available on our Shaping the Market web pages. So by the end of this week, the guidance document will be updated to contain the details from the slide. You can also find details of your area commissioners for those that aren't aware through our Shaping the Market web pages, and the link is available there. We've got a toll called Who to Contact in Commissioning. And again, just the promotion of the Shaping the Market web pages, where we have got a wealth of information around quality, good practice available to providers. And the other way that we communicate regularly with the market is via our weekly provider bulletin. So if anybody on the call isn't receiving that, then please do email the market intelligence team, and we'll add you to the distribution list for that. Just check if there's a new question. Dave, but I can't see it. Anybody else can see a question?
No, I can't either. I think on that basis, I think we've covered everything that we needed to share. I think we've answered all the questions that are in the questions and answers. So I don't know, Sue, if we wanted to draw it to a conclusion then.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you, everybody. And there's a second event if you've got any colleagues that weren't able to attend today. That's on Thursday. Again, the details which are in the bulletin on how to sign up to that. But thank you and have a good day.